For the past 30 years, we've been receiving the same training as our policing partners. We follow the same standards. We're subject to the same rules.
Provincial recognition for Indigenous policing in Alberta.
Everybody showing all their love and support has helped the journey. They turned it into something beautiful for our girl and help her create beautiful memories and happy memories with our family.
And a special Halloween surprise from a famous Hollywood actor for this Alberta girl.
Good evening, I'm Brittany Hobson. The Nova Scotia lobster dispute came up on Parliament Hill today as the Fisheries Committee continued its study of Mi'kmaq lobster harvesters and how a moderate livelihood to fish will be implemented. Today, the panel of MPs heard from Mi'kmaq lawyer Naomi Metallic. A New Brunswick MP asked her what should have been done differently.
Where things could have been improved in terms of what's happened before. These are complex issues, but sort of letting, I think some strong voices from the government explaining that these are constitutional rights that have to be balanced. And instead of perhaps, letting a narrative unfold in the media that allows people to question whether Indigenous people have the right to a moderate livelihood, or letting people think that perhaps they're violating the rule of law by exercising such rights.
Elsewhere in Ottawa today, two Conservative members of Parliament hammered the Minister of Indigenous Services during question period. They tag-teamed Mark Miller over the government's handling of Nishikandaga's First Nations water crisis.
In the riding of Kenora, Nishikantaga First Nation has been evacuated, Mr. Speaker, because they have no water. The water plant has shut down. This summer, the government has created many new massive programs to address the crisis of the COVID-19 pandemic, but somehow ensuring clean water for Indigenous communities is something they deem to be too ambitious. Mr. Speaker, the government has pledged to end all drinking water advisories by this spring, and I'm wondering if the Minister of Indigenous Services can recommit to that timeline today.
The Honourable Minister.
I thank the member for this exceedingly important question, and I do reiterate the fact that it is unacceptable that Niskandiga has been without clean water for over 25 years. This is a government who has invested $16.5 million into a new plant, in particular in Niskandiga, and in other places across Canada. There's much more work to do, but this is something that has occurred over a quarter of a century. And if you look at the 10 years of investment of the Conservatives in Niskandiga in particular, they only put $300,000 in per year, which is just a tragedy. And it's something that we've committed to fix. We will fix it, and we'll fix it with financial resources and partnerships with First Nations. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Kamloops Thompson Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, Niskandiga First Nations is on day 9,406 of a boil water advisory, the longest in Canada. The minister was there in 2016 and promised it would be done by 2018. They are not alone. Friday, the chief of the Chippewas of the Nawash told CBC that their plant will not be open until 2023. This is one of over 60 communities who still cannot put clean drinking water into a glass. They cannot wash their hands in this time of COVID. How much longer is the Prime Minister going to make them wait? If it's not 2021, then when is it?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I would encourage the member to look down to the bottom of that article where she got that information and see the quote from the elder in particular that says that the Prime Minister is the first one to care and to actually have done something, and to give him respect for that. There is a lot more work to be done, and this is a product of decades of neglect. We continue to move on, and obviously it's too early to determine the full impact of COVID-19 on water infrastructure timelines, but we do remain aggressively committed to meeting that goal, and in partnership with First Nations well after that.
The trial of a Thunder Bay man accused in the death of a First Nations woman who was struck by a trailer hitch started today. Braden Bushby is facing charges of manslaughter and aggravated assault in the death of 34-year-old Barbara Kentner. Kentner died 5 months after she was injured in the January 2017 incident. Bushby has pleaded guilty to the aggravated assault charge, but not manslaughter. He was at one point charged with second-degree murder, but that charge was withdrawn in September. Today, his lawyer said that there is no evidence that the attack was motivated by racism, even if media reports have framed it that way. In Alberta, Indigenous policing is now being recognized under the Provincial Police Act. It will give First Nations police services more freedom when it comes to decision making. Members of the Blood Tribe Police say it's a step in the right direction, but it's not just recognition that is needed. Tamara Pimentel has the story.
Here on the Blood Tribe, the community's police service has its own dispatch and communication center, a cell block, and 37 police officers. They've been operating for 30 years, but Inspector of Admin Support Farika Prince says it hasn't been easy.
For the past 30 years, we've been receiving the same training as our policing partners. We follow the same standards, we're subject to the same rules, the same hiring practices, and yet we're significantly underfunded compared to our policing partners.
There are 3 Indigenous police services in Alberta, and in October, the Alberta government announced it will recognize those forces in the Provincial Police Act. This gives Indigenous policing more power to make decisions, hire and appoint their own officers, issue tickets, and enforce community bylaws without approval by the province. It's something Indigenous police forces have been seeking for years. But Prince says one thing is still missing.
I mean, it's great to get this recognition. It's great that we're going to be able to govern ourselves. But what we're missing here is the funding that goes along with it.
Even with this announcement, Indigenous policing in Alberta is still seen as a program. It gets program funding by the province and federal government. Last year's budget was at roughly $6 million for the Blood Tribe Police, but that funding isn't always guaranteed. It needs to be renewed every 1 to 5 years.
We need to be moved from a program to essential service.
Police Chief Kyle Meltingtallow says essential service funding would bring a sense of security to the community.
They want to feel safe. They want their crime to be solved to the best of its ability. And they want their situations addressed in a timely manner.
Blaise Bomer, press secretary for the Minister of Justice, says funding might be possible in the future through grants.
There are other police grants that the province delivers, and we're certainly open to keeping conversations open with First Nations police services to see if and when those grants could be applicable.
With over 1,400 square kilometers to cover, to its community, the Blood Tribe Police Service is essential, and Prince says gaining that recognition is a step in the right direction, but hopes that in the future, changes happen to Indigenous police funding.
Indigenous people deserve quality public safety, and when they're underfunding Indigenous police services, they're basically saying that public safety in an Indigenous community with their own police service isn't as important.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, on the Blood Reserve.
What do you think of this change to Alberta's Police Act? We want to hear what you think. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca. Leave a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also follow APTN News on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube to share your comments. Time now for our first quick break. Coming up, a call to exonerate Louis Riel ahead of the anniversary of his hanging.
Louis Riel wasn't fighting against Canada. He was fighting to protect the land that people who were occupying the land to enter into Canada, into Confederation.
According to Statistics Canada, 2 of the 3 most violent cities in the country are in Saskatchewan. Priscilla Wolfe has a look at why the province has such a big problem with violence and crime.
In its latest release, Statistics Canada ranks North Battleford as the most violent city in the country, while Prince Albert is the 3rd most violent city. Prince Albert Chief of Police Chief John Bergen says the city has seen a rise of violence for over a decade.
Looking at our rankings since 2009, we can see that Prince Albert has consistently been in the top 5 for violent crime almost every year. often in the top 2 or 3.
Chief Bergen thinks that the pandemic is one big reason for the latest spike.
We know that the pandemics and the challenges of COVID-19 and the financial stress and all those factors are going to really challenge our mental health and our wellness. And in doing that, is that one of the factors in the violent crime that we've seen? And I think it is.
Cheryl Kimbley, chair for the Prince Albert Police Commission, says social problems and gangs are the roots of why crime is increasing.
We could have 100 cops out on the street, and if we don't start looking at the root causes of all the crime, the things that are happening, the homelessness and the drugs, the gangs, the alcohol, and how did they get there, if we don't start dealing with that, then it's not going to go away. The crime doesn't stop just because we put more men on the street or because we cut the budget and we put money elsewhere.
Kimbley adds, the violence is taking a human and social toll.
I know that people often look at these statistics that come out and they forget about the people, the people that are actually moving this kind of stuff, and the people that have to take time out of their lives of their families and protect us and do the things that they do daily.
The Prince Albert Police aren't naming any gangs, but they say that gang crime and conflicts are reasons that the violence rate is so high.
When we look at these results from 2019, there was some gang activity that was a factor in the violent crime ratings. What we're looking at currently with some of our recent violence, absolutely it's been related to gang activity and conflict within a group.
With the social problems and the pandemic, there's no sign that there'll be any declines in violence and crime anytime soon. And the province will continue to have one of the worst violence rates in Canada. Priscilla Wolf, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
The Northwest Territories wants to hire more Indigenous people in the public sector. They've been trying for decades, but the number of Indigenous civil servants is still low. Charlotte Moore-Jacobs talked to some former government workers who believe systemic barriers to hiring cannot be resolved under the current system.
It's that time of year where the government of the Northwest Territories promises for more Indigenous representation in public service. A priority of current and past legislative assemblies played out in new standing committees and annual reports. But the numbers have remained the same for decades. Indigenous representation in the public sector hovers at 30%, despite the NWTs' Indigenous population sitting at 51%. Brenda Norris wants the government's current affirmative action policy scrapped. And a Nunavut beneficiary, she's worked various HR and policy roles, including Manager of Diversity and Inclusion for the GNWT.
I noticed that whenever it was brought up in the ledge, the lack of Indigenous representation in the public service, that HR would scramble and they come out with all these stats about the lack of education, et cetera, when really I had a woman working for me who had a university degree and she was Indigenous from this area, and they would not hire her.
The affirmative action policy categorizes hiring priority into 3 groups: Indigenous Northerners, those born in the NWT or who have lived half their life in the NWT, and everyone else.
As the years went by, as I looked at each one, the gap got higher and higher and higher in salary. And the last time it was in the annual report, the gap was, I think, about $19,000 difference between Indigenous and non-Indigenous employees.
Norris equated some salary gaps to a low number of Indigenous people in senior management positions.
So when I brought it to the attention of the then DM, they took it out of the annual report the next year. That's how they dealt with that problem. So that's how things are done. They take it out, they remove the information, they display it in a different way so it looks like it's really attractive when really it's not.
So I was trying to maintain Trinidad as a separate riding.
Tom Bolio spent 3 terms as a member of the Legislative Assembly and 2 years as Manager of Human Resources. But even he faced opposition when he suggested making changes to the affirmative action policy.
When you look at the population in Northwest Territories, 51% approximately is Indigenous and in the working age, people between the age of 16 and 65, it's only 42%. So what I always thought was that maybe the new target should be 42%, because you keep it at 50%, people don't, and without a strategy, it stays at 30%.
APTN requested an interview with the Territorial Standing Committee on Government Operations, but were denied an interview. The committee is expected to table a report this assembly. Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
A Montreal City Councillor is forming a national coalition to demand the exoneration of Louis Riel. Riel was hanged for treason in 1885, and this group wants an apology from Canada before the November 16th anniversary of his death. Montreal City Councillor Marvin Rotrand says for years, leaders in Quebec have called for Riel to be pardoned. Joining the coalition are Métis, civil liberties, and municipal groups from across Canada. They want Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller to exonerate Riel in a public announcement and share the view that the country's Riel-related narrative has to change.
The Manitoba Act, which incorporated the demands of the Métis, had a profound impact on what Canada would become, a country that, at least on paper, is committed to minority rights, a duality of languages, the official languages of English and French, respect for religion, whether it's Protestant, Catholic, or anything else. And this largely came out of the commitments that were made in 1870.
Louis Riel wasn't fighting against Canada. He was fighting to protect the land that people who were occupying the land to enter into Canada, into Confederation. And a lot of Canadians don't know that. It's these tangible actions that show that reconciliation is real. It's these actions that bring a new conversation to who Louis Riel is, that he was not just some Métis hero who had some war in 1885.
We have to take another quick break, but you'll want to stick around for this story about a community coming together to celebrate a young girl on Halloween.
It is an awesome turnout. I feel like towns like this really come together in times of need, and I feel like, and I'm hoping that this little girl feels loved and supported.
Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Today's photo of the day is provided by Miriam Rosnignal. This beautiful scene is from the banks of the Howes River, located near the Innu Nation of Matamakush Lac John. Winter is coming and Remembrance Day is just around the corner. We want to see your pictures, especially pictures of the veterans in your family. Send us your photo to share@aptn.ca, and maybe your photo will be our photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Here's tomorrow's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. 2 above in St. John's, 4 degrees in Halifax, -5 in Nain, -4 in Happy Valley Goose Bay, -1 in Gaspe, -1 in Quebec City, some sun and 12 in Sarnia and Windsor. In northwestern Ontario, 4 above in Wawa, 11 degrees in Thunder Bay. In northern Manitoba, -2 with some sun in Thompson, 4 above in Norway House. Sunny skies and 15 in Dawson, 16 above in Brandon. In Saskatchewan, 19 degrees and sunny skies in Regina, 15 in Yorkton. 8 above in L'Orange and 8 in Buffalo Narrows. Heading over to northern Alberta, it's 10 above in Grand Prairie and Peace River. 18 degrees and sunny skies in Lethbridge, 20 above in Medicine Hat. 10 degrees in Kamloops and Penticton. Cloudy skies and 8 above in Smithers, -9 in Fort Nelson. In the Yukon, a chilly -20 in Mayo, -9 in Watson Lake. Over to the NWT, -12 in Trout Lake and Fort Liard. -16 in Colville Lake, -15 in Inuvik. In Nunavut, -14 in Chesterfield, -6 in Arviat. -12 in Iqaluit, -8 and some snow in Clyde River. A 9-year-old girl in Alberta with a terminal brain tumor celebrated a special Halloween with her neighbors and a personal message from a famous Hollywood actor. Chris Stewart was at the Halloween event and he brings us this.
Say cheese! Wave!
Dozens of neighbors showed up in the town of Morinville, north of Edmonton, on Halloween to put a smile on the face of Arizona Burns. Just a month ago, Arizona was diagnosed with a form of brain cancer that does not respond to radiation or chemotherapy. Her doctors estimate she has about 6 months to live. Arizona's mother reached out on social media for people to come to their home and have a Halloween parade. And come they did. Dinosaurs, Ghostbusters, cowboys, and Jedis.
Just seeing the post and hearing it on the radio really kind of touched us all as a family. So we figured it'd be nice to come out, and the event so far is great. There's costumes all over the place.
Arizona requested people drop off donations to the Morinville Food Bank. Lots of donations were dropped off to help the needy.
It is an awesome turnout. I feel like towns like this really come together in times of need, and I feel like, and I'm hoping that this little girl feels loved and supported.
Arizona received a personal video from Canadian actor Reynolds.
I just want to send you a little video and let you know that I'm thinking about you. I'm sending you tons of love, and I hope that I am lucky enough to get to meet you in person.
Arizona's mother, Charisse Cardinal, says the day will be remembered.
Everybody showing all their love and support has helped the journey. They turned it into something beautiful for our girl and help her create beautiful memories and happy memories with our family. It's just beautiful how much everybody loves my daughter.
Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Morinville, Alberta.
Very heartwarming story. You could say this next story is the very definition of a fluke. We should stress that the driver of this commuter train in the Netherlands is safe. The train crashed through a barrier today and ended up dangling in midair on the tail of a whale. The tail in question is actually part of an art exhibit. The artist who designed the sculpture was surprised it was still strong enough to support that much weight 20 years later. And that's all your APTN National News for this Monday, November 2nd. You can, of course, find more Indigenous news online at aptnnews.ca or on the APTN News app. I'm Brittany Hobson. Have a great night and stay healthy.